Great. Thank you, Steve, for organizing this amazing session, and thank you all for being here. Yeah. Great job. Thank you. So we get to talk tonight about whether our sense of self, whether our sense of being an independent person is reality, right? Or is our sense of self too narrow? So we know that things that make us the way we are include our genes, our genes that we inherit from our parents, the environment that we grow up in, that we live in. The question for today is, do our resident microbes, all of those little organisms that live in us and on us, do they also influence who we are in an important way? So, Rudolph, could I have the next slide? Yeah. So I'm going to start by just introducing you to the microbial world in which we live. So microbes have been here for billions of years before animals or plants evolved, right? So for about 2 billion years.
Come over.
Can you hear me?
I don't need any. Do I? The charts or anything?
Something needs to.
Yeah, you can mute yourselves. We're hearing some.
She's doing a slides.
Good.
You want to go upstairs?
Okay, so Earth formed.
Reese, unmute.
Bacteria.
Reese, mute yourself.
Yes. There were bacteria on Earth for about 2 billion years at least before anything else evolved. So what's shown right here is a phylogenetic tree of all of life. And these are all bacteria. Rudolph, can you close the chat so we can see the little key piece? Or yeah, just move it. Thank you. Okay, yeah. So in this phylogenetic tree, this is just showing you the genetic variation that's out there in life, right? So the length of these lines indicates basically more genetic variation, and there's all this variation. These are all bacteria. These guys down here are microbes also, called archaea. And even some of these guys down here are microbes. And then on the next slide shows you that you are, yeah, just go to the next slide, Rudolph. That's good. Yep, you're here. And all of the plants and animals and fungi, they're down here too, right? So all the rest of this is bacteria because they had billions of years to evolve before we got here, and also they evolve really quickly, which is a really interesting, and that's a whole thing we can get into about, for example, they evolve antibiotic resistance, they evolve in response to whatever it is we're doing. Okay, microbes live everywhere. You can find them in the ice, in the Arctic and the Antarctic. You can find them inside rock, believe it or not. They're at the bottom of the ocean. They're flying through the air. They're everywhere. And to them, we are just another habitat. We're just another place to live. And we are, in fact, a nice, cozy habitat. So Rudolph, next slide, will show you. So again, to keep sort of introducing you to how I, as a microscopist, think about bacteria. So there are a lot of bacteria everywhere. They're in a milliliter of seawater. Oh, I meant to bring like a dye to show you a milliliter. But anyway, a milliliter, little square cube, a centimeter on the side. Less than a teaspoon, yeah, there's 2.5 or so milliliters in a teaspoon sugar cube, yeah. So there are about 1 million bacteria in that much seawater. Maybe in the gyres in the middle of the ocean, only a tenth that many. But basically, most places near the coast or in your drinking water, there's going to be 1 million bacteria. But bacteria, so that's a lot, right? But bacteria are very small. So this silly little drawing shows you that little dot in the middle. Imagine that's a bacterium, and the cube around it is how much space that bacterium has in seawater. So it's like, oh man, 1 million bacteria in your water, but okay, they're not really very dense in there. They got a lot of space. Everyone knows that soil, dirt is dirty, right? So if you think about how many bacteria are in dirt or soil, next slide, please. There's about 1,000 times as many, right? So that little sugar cube has about 1 billion bacteria in it, in the soil. So here's my silly little drawing of that little bacterium inside a little cube. Shows you how much space it has. But I can do a little better than that. Beneath it there on the slide is a picture of some soil. It happens to be agricultural soil that I embedded in plastic and made a thin section of and looked at under the microscope, because scientists do that kind of thing. And the little dots that you see in there, the bright white dots, each of those is a bacterial cell. Okay, so that's about how dense bacteria are in dirt. And then the next slide shows you how dense they are in your gut. So each of these little glowing green and blue and orange and red dots, that's a bacterial cell. The stuff you see down at the bottom there is the tissue of a colon. So that's a picture I took of a mouse colon, right? So we are a really nice habitat. There's enough food, there's water if you're a bacterium, right? There's plenty of food, plenty of water, it's nice and warm. We're a great place to live. So you have about 1 million bacteria on every square centimeter of your skin, 20 billion bacteria on your skin, 10 billion bacteria on your teeth, 50 billion on your tongue, and about 40 trillion in your gut. So these are your trillions of microbial friends. Yeah. Yeah. Washing your hands is good. Yeah. Okay, so that sort of orients you to the microbial world in which we live. Next slide tells you about each of. So each of us is, for these bacteria, we're a world, right? We are an ecosystem for them. So you have microbial cells in you that outnumber your own cells of your human body, by about 2 to 1. Depends on whether you're constipated, actually, because most of them are in your gut. Sorry, I hope everyone hasn't had. Okay, so and the genes in those microbes. So those aren't all just the same kind of bacteria, right? There are a lot of different kinds of bacteria, and collectively their genome is about 100 times bigger than yours. And that's important because they can do a lot of things that our bodies can't do, and that's what we're going to start talking about a little bit later. So many animals and plants basically recruit bacteria to do things that we need done that our bodies can't do, right? Our own microbial communities are unique to us, so each of us has the same general kinds of bacteria in our mouth. Each of us will have the same kinds of bacteria more or less on our teeth, same kinds of bacteria on our tongue as other people in the room, same kinds of bacteria in our gut more or less as other people in the room, but the exact details are very specific to you. So this community develops inside you and is quite stable over time, so that they can use it for forensics, actually. They can identify people based on their microbial communities. And then the next slide talks just a little bit about how that comes to be. So there's a lot of work that was done on how you acquire your microbiome. You're born sterile. I think we still think you're born sterile. And then you acquire bacteria first from your mother, but also from other people around you. And it's actually surprisingly hard to figure out sometimes where all the bacteria come from that are in a person, right? So there is a connection to family. There's studies that have been done in Africa where you can look at where there are well-defined sort of kinship networks among little villages and people going from village to village, and you can to some extent trace how people get their bacteria, but there's a lot that's not really actually clear. But diet matters a great deal, especially for the gut microbiota. The gut bacteria respond to what you eat, and if you eat a diet rich in fiber and fruits and vegetables, that causes a diverse gut microbiome to grow, which is a good thing. And if you wipe them out with antibiotics, they can come back surprisingly well, actually, but especially with an appropriate diet. Okay, and then what these bacteria do is, there's just a little list on the next slide here of what these bacteria microbes do in our bodies. So among the things we know, is that they're required for our immune system to develop the way it should. Actually, they're required for our gut to develop the way it should as well. The gut microbes digest parts of your diet that you could not digest without them. It's probably one reason why we recruit them into our bodies. They produce essential nutrients like vitamin B12 is only made in animal guts. So strict vegetarians can be deficient in vitamin B12. It didn't used to be a problem because there were always bugs in the grain, and the bugs had bacteria in their guts. But now that storage of grain is better, you can actually get vitamin B12 deficiencies if you're very strict vegetarian. Gut microbes also alter how our bodies process drugs, like how fast a drug is broken down. If you take acetaminophen, for example, how fast it's broken down and how it's broken down in your body depends on what else is going on in your gut, what these gut bacteria are doing. So it's all, if you think about personalized medicine, we used to think maybe naively, oh, we just sequence everybody's genome and then we know everything about how your body works and we can personalize medical treatment. Actually, it's not that simple because it also matters what bacteria you've got going on in your gut. And then oral microbes, which is where I spend most of my time, turns out that they can reduce your blood pressure if you are eating a diet that is rich in nitrate, plant-derived nitrate, like lettuce and celery and beets. There's actually a rather large blood pressure reducing effect, and we'll talk about that a little later. Okay, so next slide, we just get into the pictures that I have to show you just because it's fun. So I spend my days sitting at the microscope, taking pictures of bacteria. This is one of them. This is dental plaque, which we just scraped off somebody's teeth using a toothpick and dropped it on a slide and applied these probes that made the different kinds of bacteria glow in different colors. And yeah, and isn't it cool? So each of these little filaments or little dots is a bacterial cell. And so the reason I study this is we're trying to understand why are there so many different kinds of bacteria and what are they all doing? And when you look at how they're organized, you get clues about what they're doing. Like this one that was here in the pink, it was always there in the sequencing data that they produced in the Human Microbiome Project. Thank you very much. It was always there, but nobody studied it. Nobody really knew what it did. As soon as you look at a picture like this, you're like, that's the foundational taxon. It's like the oak tree in the forest or the coral in the reef. It's creating a structure, creating a spatial structure that other bacteria then go and live in and on. And then actually it turns out that these bacteria, the bacteria shown, sorry for people in Zoom, the bacteria in yellow and blue there, they prefer to live somewhere where there's no oxygen. And this is on your teeth, right? So obviously there's oxygen around, but the bacteria in green, in that outer ring, they use it up, right? So, and that's a thick enough band of bacteria to basically take up all the oxygen and make this anoxic environment on the inside. Okay, so anyway, this is why we are studying these things. One more slide shows just the rest of the bacteria in this really cool structure. So that's an example of these things that you're wiping out all the time when you brush your teeth. The next slide shows you something else that lives in dental plaque, just another set of bacteria, and then some of these bacteria are among the ones that use the nitrate in your diet to be able to modulate blood pressure. But more of that is done by the tongue bacteria on the next slide. So your tongue has, it's got papillae. You've probably heard about the fungiform papillae on your tongue. They have the taste buds, but there are 10 times more filiform papillae, these little things, little hair, there's a picture of one of them here. And in humans, they have these hair-like projections. Actually, in all animals, mammals, they have hair-like projections. And in humans, those projections get covered by bacteria. So here's one of them, magnified, and then even more magnified, and then with my microscopy to show you the different little bacterial cells in different colors. And the bacteria that do, well, first of all, to say, okay, so the little stripe down the middle, that's the human cell, the cell sticking off your tongue. And then this really dense layer of bacteria. It's amazing. And it's beautiful. And the ones shown in blue and yellow are the ones that do the thing with nitrate. We don't know what all the others are doing and how they're working together. So that's what I spend my days trying to figure out. But I believe that the reason that there are so many bacteria on your tongue is because we need them there, right? We have recruited them to do this biochemical transformation that our bodies can't do. The next slide just has one more picture of these. Oh, did we skip one or did I take it? Yeah, yes, go back one. Just for one more gorgeous picture of, okay, so here, these enormous, complicated, highly organized structures that these bacteria build on your tongue and your teeth, right? And I think that there are a lot of them because we need them. And so what we need them for is on the next slide, it's the transformation of nitrate into nitrite. So when you eat a diet that's rich in beets and celery and lettuce, or beet juice, if you really want to power in the nitrate, that nitrate goes straight through your mouth into your stomach, is absorbed into your bloodstream, and then is concentrated into saliva tenfold. So the nitrate washes over the bacteria on your tongue and your teeth, and they convert nitrate to nitrite, and that gets converted to nitric oxide, which dilates blood vessels and controls blood pressure and other things. So there's an interesting study that shows that if you use mouthwash twice a day, was what they found in this study, that's associated with an increased chance of getting prediabetes and diabetes and hypertension. So it's an actually significant effect. Right? And the other finding is, so if you drink beet shots, so athletes drink these concentrated beet juice shots because it has been found for this reason to improve your athletic performance. So if you drink a beet shot, it lowers your blood pressure, but not if you either keep spitting out the saliva, so you interrupt the ability of the nitrate to circulate, or if you have been using an antiseptic mouthwash. So if you use mouthwash, it is able to wipe out the ability of these bacteria to do what we've recruited them into our mouths to do. So the question I leave you with, and we're going to move to phase 2 of our talk. On the next slide is just the question of, okay, so if our bodies don't function correctly without them, then who's in charge? Us or them? And when I made the list of things that the bacteria, that your microbiome does, I left out a critical category of thing that I think Betsy's going to tell you all about.
This is going? Yes. So I'm going to give up my Listerine. I'm convinced. It's very nice to be here. When I was at the NIH, I was involved in a lot of different areas of science, but this is the area that I was involved in that my children know about because I went home to talk about it. So it's really one of my favorite things that I did while I was at the NIH. So if I could have the next slide. So the question that I'm going to be dealing with is, to what extent do bacteria or other microbes control our brains and our behavior? This is really much more speculative than the research that Jessica told you about. It's in its infancy, but as the Human Microbiome Project unfolded and people were looking at the metabolic capability of bacteria, they noticed that some of the things that bacteria produce had the possibility of stimulating the nervous system. So it has been an area of interest for a while. Next slide, please. And really what Jessica was telling you is that we are each an ecosystem. Our microbes have profound effects on how our body works, on the tissues that they occupy. And within those tissues, the microbes are secreting chemicals. So they metabolize, they make new chemicals, and those chemicals then interact with the tissues. And especially within the gut, there's a nervous system connection between the gut and the brain. So there's a pathway for microbial microbes in the gut to impact the brain. So what I'm going to tell you about is really stories in animals, but it leads us to question, are microbes really working like the guy behind the curtain in Wizard of Oz? They're hidden, but are they in control? Next slide. So I'm going to give you two stories from animals, and one is a story of behavioral transfer between strains of mice, and the other one concerns Yellowstone wolves. So Rudolph, the next one, please. So there are interesting behaviors in mice, and two strains of mice, one called BALB-C and the other NIH Swiss, are two inbred strains, so minimizing any kind of difference between them. They're virtually genetically identical. And so over time, investigators have really characterized the behavior of these strains of mice. And these two strains are notably different in their behaviors. And so one test of behavior is time in a light box. So mice generally prefer the dark. And if you're a timid mouse, you really stay in the dark. But if you're a little bolder, you get out of the box and you go exploring. And so this is I don't think the Zoom people can see what I'm doing, but I'm pointing to this box. So here is time in a light box. And so if you're a BALB-C mouse and there's a box of light versus your little dark corner, you're not going to spend very much time in the light box. If you're an NIH Swiss mouse, you're bolder, you're curious, so you get out of the box and you spend more time outside of the box. So NIH Swiss mice are a little bit bolder than BALB-C. Another test of that is this test called latency to step down. And so if you put the mice on this little platform, then the NIH Swiss mice here in the black just hop right off. So they don't spend very much time on that platform. They're curious, they get down, they run around. The BALB-C mice, though, are hesitant. They're on the platform, they're looking down, it's like, I don't know, I don't want to get off, and so it takes them a while. So these are very well-known tests of timidity versus bold behavior in mice. So microbiome researchers wanted to use these tests to see whether there was a microbiome link. And so these investigators, led by Stephen Collins, did a test where they grew mice in completely sterile conditions. So these mice, I will say that they're a little bit wacky when they're grown without any bacteria, but they're more or less okay. And so what they did then was they took bacteria from normal, healthy, either BALB-C or NIH Swiss mice, and they switched them. So BALB-C mice got bacteria from NIH Swiss, and NIH Swiss got bacteria from BALB-C. On the next slide, Rudolph, please. So this is just one of those tests. This is using the latency to step down test. And so it's kind of complicated, so I'll just walk you through it. And so all of this is with NIH Swiss mice. And so remember that NIH Swiss mice, they don't spend very much time on that little platform by themselves. And so if you take the normal mice, they don't spend much time. And if you take germ-free mice that have gotten bacteria from NIH Swiss mice, so same transfer, they also don't spend very much time there. But if you give germ-free NIH Swiss mice bacteria from BALB-C mice, now all of a sudden they're very timid. They don't want to get down off that platform. And so the reverse experiment was also done. They took the BALB-C mice, which are normally timid, And they gave the germ-free mice bacteria from other Betsy mice, still timid. But if they gave them bacteria from the NIH Swiss mice, then they're less timid. And so this was pretty revolutionary. It was really one of the first demonstrations of evidence that the microbiome was having an impact on behavior. Next slide. So that was in 2013. And since 2013, there's been a lot going on in this arena. And I will not go through other experiments, but just give you sort of the take-home message from a few of these studies. And one in 2014 showed that the microbiome is essential for social development in mice. So I told you that the mice are a little bit not right if they're grown without a microbiome. And part of that is that they don't bond with other mice. So there's something going on with social development. The gut microbiome was shown to regulate depressive behavior in rats. Another series of behaviors relates to dominant versus submissive behaviors in rodents that has been shown to be linked to the microbiome. And then moving into some human studies, one study in 2019 showed that human populations that lack specific types of or sort of have less of a particular type of microbiome or microbial species tend to be, there's an association with depression. And then recently, there has been more interest in the possibility that autism spectrum disorder is associated with microbial dysmorphism. So the populations of bacteria are not quite right in people with autism. So I think a lot of people are interested in that. People with autism tend to have some gut issues, and so that's an area of active research now. So really what people are doing in this realm is trying to understand mechanism. So there's a lot of phenomenology to date. We've done this kind of experiment showing, yeah, it looks like really there's something going on, there's links, but how does that work? And that's where the research is going. Can I have the next slide? So the second story, I think this is such a fun story. When I first retired, I was interested in writing children's books. And so I thought of turning this into a children's book, and my children said, it's terrifying, you can't do that. So you'll have to let me know if you think it's terrifying. But this paper came out in 21 showing that with this title that you can see that there is a link between behavior and these wolves in Yellowstone. Next slide. So Toxoplasmosis gondii. Show of hands, people know this? Yay, you're probably all cat owners. Yes. So Toxoplasmosis gondii is really pretty well known. It's quite common in people. It comes from cats. And so the life cycle of this parasite, so it's a one-celled parasite, it's not a bacterium, but it is quite common as part of your overall microbiome, is generally considered to be benign unless you are pregnant. So it's known to have teratogenic, sort of it causes birth defects in early embryogenesis if the fetus is, if toxo gets into the fetus. So we're going to call Toxoplasmosis gondii toxo from here on out. It's much easier to say. So let me just walk you through this a little bit because the life cycle is relevant to the wolves. So toxo requires transmission through a cat. Lots of different kinds of cats will work. House cats, wild cats, but it requires a cat. So in a cat, it goes through this germline phase where it makes little eggs. So it obviously can reproduce then because it has eggs. So these go into the poop of the cat, and then the poop gets taken up by other species. Notably for the cat, it's taken up by prey, their prey. So rodents, birds, lots of animals can be infected by toxo. The tissues of these animals then make cysts of this parasite, and then the cat eats the prey, and the life cycle begins again. So any other animal who is exposed to cat poop is likely to also get toxo. People, other like farm animals, lots of ways to get it if you're associated with a cat. Now, interestingly, very interestingly to me anyway, is that we've known for a long time that rodents who are infected with toxo get less afraid of cats. So they avoid cats much less. And this provides an evolutionary advantage to the parasite because they're much more easily eaten. So this behavioral issue in rodents has been well documented for a long time. So before I progress to the next slide, I'll just remind you that about 12% of the US population carries this parasite because of their association with cats, particularly cats who live outside and eat animals. Next slide. So, to the wolves. Wolves disappeared from Yellowstone a long time ago, but they were reintroduced in 1995, and beginning at that time, they were tagged, and they've been tracked ever since. So, there are many, many samples from wolves over, 30 years now. So in 2022, these samples were analyzed with the question of understanding toxo positivity in these animals. And they really wanted to know how that positivity related to cougars in Yellowstone. So they overlaid the population of wolves and cougars and found that wolves whose territory overlapped with cougars were perhaps not surprisingly more likely to be infected with toxo. Now, the interesting thing that they found out about these wolves is that they were much more likely to make high-risk decisions. And for a wolf, your high-risk decision is whether to leave the pack. And so you might leave the pack to start your own pack, or you might try to take on the current pack leader to become a new pack leader. But if you're infected with toxo, you're more likely to do that. And I thought that was fascinating. Next slide. And I wasn't the only one. So this story got picked up in the popular press quite a lot, and there was this story in Business Insider that I don't know if you can read this, but it says, "Is the urge to start a company caused by a brain parasite?" And so this is why my children said that I couldn't turn this into a children's story. But it has caused people to begin to ask the question of risky behavior taking in people. Is there an association? Since we know that many of us have toxo, especially those of us who are cat lovers, what does that say? Are we more likely to take risks? And so we're entering into wildly speculative territory now, but I think it's interesting again, so I'm going to do it. Next slide. And so I want to emphasize correlation does not equal causality. I think you probably all know that, and yet I'm going to offer some suggestive tidbits here. So there was a study in Denmark. So Denmark keeps track of toxo positivity pretty closely because of that association with birth defects that I mentioned. And so there was a study that showed that toxo-positive women were almost 30% more likely to start their own business. There has also been a study that showed a correlation between toxopositivity and an increase in schizophrenia, suicide, and the likelihood of getting into a car crash. And then this study here that I refer to by Kevin Lafferty looked at it more of a societal level and showed that, so this is the national prevalence of toxopositivity. You can see that it gradually goes up, and correlated with a neuroticism score. And so neuroticism in this study was measured by guilt proneness. And so they concluded that people were maybe doing more risky things and felt guilty about it, and so were neurotic. I don't know, but interesting nevertheless. So this is sort of where we are with this. It's intriguing, very early days in the research. I think it's an interesting area for people to be going into. Next slide. But, I think in addition to these a little bit more speculative areas of how these microbes are controlling our bacteria, there are many more, maybe less scandalous studies, but solid studies linking your microbes to your mood and other impact on the brain. So I think it's pretty clear that the gut microbiome does affect the brain through the nervous system, through its links. And so, we need to understand this better, but it seems pretty solid. And so where does this leave us, really? And I think we are in control of ourselves. Our bacteria are not really totally in control of ourselves, but we can do a lot to make our bacteria healthy, our overall microbiome more healthy, and that includes eating whole foods, vegetables, lots of fiber, things that Jessica also alluded to. So that's the end of my story.
None of us are really here alone.
We're all ecosystems, all together.
Hey, is he?
If a person wanted to go and get tested for toxo, how would you go about it?
I think you could probably ask your doctor for a test. There are seropositivity tests given mostly to pregnant women. But there's really, your doctor might not want to, because for non-pregnant people, there are no known adverse parts to it.
It's adverse if they're going to get in a car crash.
Again, correlation is not causality. There's a lot that needs to be teased out there.
If you have dry mouth, how does that impact everything on your tongue?
Oh, that's a question for Jessica.
Does dry mouth affect your tongue? Almost certainly, but we don't quite know how yet. Tell me when you do. Yeah, I'll let you know. Yeah. One thing I should have said is the fact that we need our mouth bacteria doesn't exempt you from flossing. You still have to floss. And actually, tongue scraping is part of Ayurvedic yoga, and it does, if you scrape your tongue every day, it seems to increase the fraction of the bacteria that do the good thing with nitrate. So religions have good ideas. Yeah, tongue scraping. Oh, yeah, she's just repeating.
I know, but they can't hear you, Noreen.
You have to say it one more time.
Would you kindly say that one more time?
Thank you. So one of the practices in Ayurvedic yoga is to scrape the tongue. And often practices that are part of traditional religion, there's a reason, that there's some biological reason. And scientists have found that when you scrape your tongue, it increases the ability of the tongue bacteria to do this good transformation of nitrate for you. So you need to keep their numbers down, floss and scrape and all that, but don't wipe them out with chemicals.
So I have a question for you, which is, these microbes affect your behavior. Can your behavior affect your microbes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what you eat, what you...
No, not what you eat. Let's say you partake of risky behavior. Would you predispose yourself towards risk-forming microbes, or the other way around?
I don't know about that. I mean, as far as I know, what affects your microbial content is the environment that you put yourself in. So, and what you eat. So, would you agree with that?
Any questions from the Zoom audience. I think there was.
Well, here's a
You want me
question
to do
from
it?
Raleigh and
I thought
Jenny.
you were going to do it. So, Reverend Raleigh and Jenny, so cool. Jessica, you said that we recruit these. How do we do this?
How do we recruit? How do we recruit these bacteria? I was thinking of it in an evolutionary way. So the human body needed to lost. I'm spinning tales here. Human body lost the ability to convert nitrate to nitrite, so we needed some bacteria to do it. So evolution caused our tongues to develop this structure that the bacteria will then glom onto and do it for us. So it's a sort of evolutionarily recruit. How we then actually get these bacteria, each individual person probably from other bacteria. Little kids put everything in their mouth, including stuff that you just were eating or what, so we pass them from person to person.
Yes, Jim. I'll be back.
Hey, how do the oral bacteria relate to the gut bacteria?
Good question. Bacteria from the mouth are constantly getting swallowed into the gut. We looked pretty hard for bacteria that are present in both places, and in my opinion, there's only one species of bacteria that really legitimately lives in both places. But some of the, except when you have inflammation in the gut or colon cancer, for example, then the oral bacteria tend to predominate. So the oral bacteria can find a place to live in the gut when there's inflammation, but when you're healthy, they're pretty much different, interestingly. Yeah.
Jessica, do our near relatives, do other hominids have the same makeup of bacteria that we do?
Yeah, let's see, what do we know? Actually, dolphins have these same kinds of mouth bacteria. Dolphin teeth, if you sample them, they're not, the community of bacteria seems to evolve to each host, so they're not exactly the same, but they're pretty similar. People have done fewer studies on apes, but I think the studies they've done, they basically use the same classification for the bacteria because they're so closely related. So yeah.
So you can keep that. I now have a second one.
If you're a cat owner and your cats do not go outside or hunt or get any rodents or birds, then how does that affect the toxo cycle that you showed?
They're probably not breeding toxo then. So they really get it from exposure to outdoor animals.
And then for Jessica, is brushing your tongue, like a recommended thing then? In addition to brushing your teeth, as long as you're not using an antiseptic, chemical wash?
Yes, I used to be dubious about this advice that dentists give you to brush your tongue, but now I believe them.
It makes me gag, though.
So you shouldn't use bleach.
I wanted to ask Betsy, we talked about inoculating the Swiss mouse and the other mouse. Is it possible that we could inoculate people such that they would then have that biome that would influence their behavior?
Well, it's a really good question, and I don't want to get out of my league here, but there are procedures to do fecal transplants between people to restore a healthy microbiome to someone who has an unhealthy one. And I think behavioral and mental health issues should be considered as that is done. So there have also been studies where if you take human microbial sample, you can restore healthy behaviors in autism models of mice. So there's a lot of different possibilities of understanding the functional contribution of different bacteria through these kind of swapping experiments.
Nancy?
Just talk about toothpaste for a minute. Is it fine or whatever? It's good?
Oh, is toothpaste? Yeah, so fluoride is, okay, this has suddenly become controversial, but yeah, fluoride is good for your teeth. Yeah, I think your tongue does not care about the fluoride.
Judy, was that you?
Whoever
asked, could you do it in the microphone so they can hear you? Oh, it's pissed. Somebody was just talking. It's all right, it's passed. Oh, okay, Noreen, thank you. Your hand's not up.
Okay, John Jackson wants to know, because cats spend a lot of time licking themselves, should we be licking our cats? I'm going to give that one to you.
I don't advise licking cats. That's all I'll say about that.
I have a friend who has educated herself a lot on health issues, and she's told me that people have their microbiome analyzed, or their gut biome, and that will explain everything about their health, or will explain a lot. Is there any truth to that?
I had my microbiome analyzed because I am such a fan, and it didn't really explain anything. What it did tell me, so early in the Human Microbiome Project, there were analysis of the microbiota of people of different populations around the world, and there's a Western signature of the microbiome and a rural sort of signature, non-Western. And so I thought, I eat a lot of vegetables. I'm probably not very Western. I'm very Western. So even, that's all I learned.
Steve mentioned that I might mention Zoe. Steve and I have signed up for Zoe. The Zoe is a self-funded research study where you send in a poop sample and you send in some blood samples, but they do a DNA identification, and I think that what they report is several hundred species that in the poop sample, and then they relate the health. They give you a health index on that, so you can purchase this easily. It's pretty reliable, do you think, Steve?
Yeah, it seems so.
It seems so, and they say that we can influence our gut by having 30 different vegetables and plant-based foods in a week, as long as we don't have hyper-processed foods. And apparently the chemicals in there, along with guar gum and some other things, emulsify that layer between your gut and the cell wall, and create a change in the activity.
Yeah, I think the most amazing thing from those studies was the devastation that an antibiotic causes. Completely and utterly devastates your microbiome. And it takes a long time to recover, as the studies.
And repeated exposure over time reduces the biodiversity of your ecosystem. So I'm going to be careful with that.
Yes, Noreen.
So I want to go back to the fluoride. Fluoride is a chemical. And we don't put that in our water. Some of the communities in Massachusetts do not put that in their water. And what you said, Jessica, was that there's a lot of discussion about that in terms of the benefits versus the detrimental adverse reaction to what fluoride does in your body. What does it do in your gut? What does it do as we age, do we need it? That kind of thing. Those are the kinds of things that I would really like some answers to.
Yes, so it is interesting. So, for example, Falmouth does not put fluoride in the water. And so when our kids were growing up in Falmouth, the pediatricians would prescribe them little fluoride pills that you chew, right? And the good thing about doing it that way is you get a highly controlled dose, and you get it at the time that is most important to get it, which is when the teeth are developing, right? So that does make sense. I mean, the fluoride levels in water are very variable. You know, there's places that have natural fluoride in the water. There's places that don't. Fluoride does strengthen the teeth because it reacts with the calcium, and I think makes calcium fluoride. Yeah, right. Yeah, but what else it does, I have not really looked into it. So, but I know that the research that is currently being relied on to say that fluoride is dangerous is from an enormously high dose of fluoride from some small study in China or something. It's not very good research. And yeah, other than that, I haven't really looked into it.
And you answer the question for children, but what about seniors? We don't need fluoride. Our teeth have already been developed. So you're saying that that's a good thing to have regardless?
So what I know little about that, but sometimes when you're older, you get recession of the gum so that it exposes the root of the tooth. And then you really need fluoride to strengthen the root of the tooth. So actually for that, it can be good, but but you can get it by putting the toothpaste directly on the tooth. You know, there's ways to get it, yeah. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I hope that helps. There's some questions
There
on.
were a couple of
yeah.
questions on the Zoom.
I see this question from Lou Stern about, what did I say about micro?
Did Betsy say transfer of human microbes can affect autism?
So what I said, Lou, was that there's a mouse model of autism spectrum disorder. And that if those mice are given healthy human, and I think healthy mice, I don't remember the details of this study, but if they're given a healthy fecal transfer, then the symptoms diminish. And so they're not erased, but they're diminished. And so, I think the research is nascent there, but suggestive.
And then we also had a question from David Dow. Is the human microbiome affected by toxic chemicals? He mentions PFAS.
I
guess yes.
Yeah, I'm guessing yes too. There are, for the oral microbiome, saliva is very important, as was already mentioned, and there are certain chemicals can affect even like how sticky the saliva is, and yeah, so I'm guessing yes, but we don't really know.
Karen?
I was just asking Jessica, how long has this instrumentation been around that you're showing us these pictures? Is this fairly new study? This is quite amazing.
Yeah. Good question. The technology. So the using little DNA probes to make the bacteria glow. People have been doing that for 30 or 40 years now, but mostly in 2 colors or 3 colors. And then what we're doing differently to make it in lots of colors is spectral imaging, and that was actually developed by the people developing satellites to try to understand land use patterns. So different, grass versus trees versus whatever you're doing on the land, it sends up light of different colors, and they were trying to understand the satellite images. So they developed these algorithms for spectral imaging, and that's what we're using with the microscope. So,
thank you. It's cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, so strep throat. No antibiotics? Antibiotics? I just had it and got actually 2 because it, and now I have to get cured for a whole year in order to get over it.
You should take antibiotics
Yeah.
if you have an infection like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that you should know that there's an impact. And so you want to, at least my advice would be to take care and eat a lot of, healthy for your microbiome foods as part of your recovery.
Take a probiotic every morning.
Yeah, and prebiotics are the beets and the celery and legumes that feed it.
Yeah, I was all like woo-woo, microbiome is great and antibiotics are bad until my kids got an ear infection and then boom, okay, it's okay, we can take antibiotics.
Oh yeah, antibiotics, greatest gift to, human health, but there are just some risks.
I guess I have 2, and I think they're kind of quick, especially if I only remember one of them. But anyway, I was thinking about where the populations were, the teeth, the tongue, and the gut. And is it the environment it's those nooks and crannies? So are there a lot of so in other words, does our gut have similarities with our tongue as far as nooks and crannies and stuff?
Yeah.
And the other was, because I'll hand over the mic, are there other drugs in addition to antibiotics, like just the over-the-counter painkillers and stuff that have an effect? I read that somewhere.
Yeah, so let's see, question 1 about why different bacteria live in different places. That's a really interesting question. In fact, one of the ideas of the Human Microbiome Project originally was to find out, are there bacteria that are everywhere in your body, or is it different in each place? And the answer was pretty much surprisingly different, well, really different in each place, for various reasons. The gut is anyway, so the bacteria respond to the environment basically really fast. So in fact, like if you change your diet, the bacteria respond within a day. And I think the environment in the gut is enough different. Everything is mixed and it's just different. So yeah, you would think it maybe would be more similar to tongue, but it isn't so much. And now I've forgotten question 2.
How over-the-counter?
Oh, yeah. Oh, actually, I wanted to say about antibiotics. One of the things people are trying to do is develop really specific targeted antibiotics. The ones we have now just mow everything down. And what you want is the one that knocks out the strep throat, but doesn't knock out everything. So that's the goal. Take other drugs. I mean, basically anything that you eat is food for some bacterium or other. And I guess that includes acetaminophen and, so it's, whoever can eat it is going to get more abundant. But what would you say?
Yes.
Jessica? Oh, okay. Jessica, we all know that bacteria have special way of disabling viruses that attack them. Does that help our resistance to viruses? Has studies been shown that our bacteria actually keep us healthy, kill viruses that attack us?
That's an interesting question. I think the answer is that the viruses that attack bacteria are different from the viruses that attack us. Bacteria, by occupying lots of space, they sort of prevent bad bacteria from coming in because the space is already taken up. But yeah, I think you're talking about CRISPR, right? The way that the bacteria can chop up the DNA of the viruses that are coming in. Yeah, we haven't. I don't think our bodies have adapted to use that yet.
You mentioned we also have a lot of microbiomes on our skin, which is a very large part of our body. And is that impacted by people putting on lotions and all that? Do we know what the impact of those things?
I don't know the impact. I'm sure there is one. I mean, you affect again, the ecosystem. You're putting different things in the path of the bacteria, but whether it's bad or not, I don't know.
Yeah, there are people who think you should never wash. And there's a particular molecule that they think is lacking in our bodies because we keep killing off the skin bacteria that should be making it. I can't remember what the molecule is.
Interesting.
Jessica, on one of your pictures, you had a difference between babies that were born by cesarean and vaginal.
It was her slide.
Okay. So what's the difference? I couldn't read it fast enough. It was.
Yes, I think that's an interesting story. So the mode of delivery does have an impact on the development of the microbiome. So babies that are born vaginally, their initial exposure to bacteria looks like the mom's vaginal microbiota and skin. So the babies who are born by cesarean have just a different initial complement of bacteria compared to those who are born by cesarean, or whatever. They're different. But what people are showing over time is that those differences sort of are muted over time, but initially there's quite a difference.
Is one healthier than the other?
No. I don't. I think the conclusion is no. It was just an interesting, in terms of asking the question of how you develop your unique microbiome. That's a contributing factor. But even babies that are, I think, a month old have microbes that, like 40% is not from the mom. So they diversify pretty quickly. Yeah, we're at time, I think.
Yeah, the time is up. Noreen, is it a short one?
Jessica, just one more thing. You had mentioned that there were some people that said you should never wash. And I just had a visit with my dermatologist, and she said the only place you should put soap or wash is under your arms and in your private parts. That was it. So you don't need to wash your arms. You don't need to wash your legs. That's it. No water, no soap.
Yeah.
Well, that's our time.